work was done in 2012. As an anthropologist, field work is something we really look for. And then I worked in the archive, but it's more than a decade. And I'm still talking based on that research, I'm still talking, and research is a kind of thing that evolves over the year, but it doesn't evolve necessarily over a decade. So I really now feel that urge to go back to the empirical or to the archive once again, or dig into the things from a different approach and different angles. So when I got this invitation, I was thinking, what would I say? I keep saying the same thing over and over again in the last decade, last 10 years. I've been talking. My first presentation after completion of my PhD was in 2015, and since then, it's just a decade. Since then, I'm talking over and over the same thing. It sounds, but I can see that on its way, it's evolving, it's shifting, the focus has changes. I really find I pull along particular strings that were not present in the initial days, and I can see them through my works, through my own lecture and analysis and feedback from the audience. So that's what I keep thinking. Now, today when I said listening to Partitioned Others and Awkwardness of Illegibility, what I want to say is basically partition studies use a cliche. Often in partition studies, one would encounter the cliche of partition of mind. What does that mean? Partition of mind means that partition was not only took place on the cartography. It was not a physical or material thing, but it actually affect our, as we say in the conference title, Memoryscape, it affects our thoughts and language, it affects our theories and articulation, it affects our remembrance and forgetting. So I was thinking that partition of mind works in a very, in our intersubjective relation with the researcher and the research, with the researcher and the audience. When we make, as a researcher, when we make any encounter, and when it get feedback from the audience or from my research population, often we encounter people with some kind of awkwardness, some kind of strangeness. And that strangeness I have felt first time during my field work, but then over and over again when I presented in, I can remember another session like this, another keynote session in Siliguri a few years back when I was presenting there, and the audience was kind of, because my thesis, my PhD, one of the central thesis of my PhD is I questioned this idea of Indocentrism, that partition studies is very much Indocentric. It's all about focusing India at the center, India as the nation state at the center, and keeping that in center, we are making our narratives, or we are elaborating our narratives. So I said that we need to go beyond the Indocentric approach. And then I was explaining what I really mean by Indocentrism. So I mean by Indocentric, like partition research primarily focus on Punjab, less on Bengal. When they focus on Bengal, they focus primarily on Calcutta, less on Morijhapi or less on Dhaka. So I was talking about, particularly from my upbringing, I was talking about the erasure of East Bengal, erasure of Bangladesh in partition studies. And I was saying that this is historical, that West Bengal and East Bengal, we often say that we often celebrate united or trans-border Bangaliness. But in reality, I can see that historically, the fault line had always been there, and even before the partition. So when I was raising these things, I can feel that my Siliguri audience is in discomfort. Like they were not necessarily denying it wholesale, but they were saying that, well, Calcutta is, the snowberry of Calcutta is not only toward East Bengal, but Calcutta also marginalizes us, Calcutta also erases us out, which is true. But then, we also have to consider that there is this, we should take into account the border making. We should take into account that Dhaka and Calcutta is now under two nation states, and that relationship between the nation states complicated the relationship between Dhaka and Calcutta and West Bengal and East Bengal. So, when I was they were not, but they can feel that there is merit in my argument, but there was some kind of awkwardness. There was some kind of shock, and then there was this idea of, my thesis was saying that it's all about. Partition is kind of a saga of sadness, of loss. It's a monopolization of loss. But why don't we look that the other part of partition was jubilation of and making of Muslim identity, Muslim middle class in East Bengal, and why partition studies hardly look into that. And then that raises question to many others, particularly from other side, Oipared. The other side, people keep thinking, well, this guy, is he talking about some kind of celebration of Muslim identity? Is he kind of promoting some kind of Muslim narratives of partition, or Bangladeshi, some kind of Bangladeshi brand nationalist statist narrative, which my work never aimed to do that. My work was basically also questioned how partition and the events afterwards shaped the Hindus in Bangladesh and shaped the Biharis in Bangladesh. And particularly the case of Hindus, partition studies talk about departing Hindus. Partition studies talk about leaving Hindus from East Bengal. But they hardly look into the Hindus who didn't want to leave, who couldn't leave, who opted to live in Dhaka or Bangladesh. So what about them? They stayed in their ancestral land for various reasons, including personal, emotional, political, or economic reasons. They opted to stay here. And then, after partition, they suddenly discovered them as the minority in their own homeland. And then after 71, they had this hope that now a secular nationalism is here and things would be different. But unfortunately, we know Bangladesh never fulfilled that promise to them. So this is interesting, that why partition studies. When I talk about the when I talk about the suffering of the Hindus, like previously in my critique to Indocentrism or my critique to the India-centric approach toward partition, many people from Bangladesh would applaud and will find that this is a celebratory thing. And then they discovered that, but this guy is also talking about the Hindus who are stuck in East Bengal. And they find, okay, that's something different. And that's an awkward thing for them. Then there is this issue of the Biharis and the role of the Biharis. About 71, we keep saying that they are the villains in 71 history. But what happened in 71 toward them? What Bengalis did to the Biharis in 71. So why not? They came with a high hope that they are coming. They had to leave India. They looked for a new land for the Muslims. They came to the East Bengal. They never went. Most of the Biharis couldn't opt for West Pakistan because that was a stranger land to them. But in East Bengal, they have these long trajectories for livelihood. Biharis came to this land long before the partition. So when partition had taken place, they thought that they would go into East Bengal and make a new Muslim land. And soon after their arrival, not even a decade, they discovered that the rise of Bengali nationalism here. And they become, again, their identity here become again villainized, criminalized, and then there is this power struggle and those things. So, in no way, my work satisfied, no research would do that, my work satisfied across the board audience. So there are questions, there are awkwardness, there are suspicion. And some would say, some definitely was very kind to me, but then there are others who say that this is a is this another mullah narrative from Bangladesh coming to encounter the so-called Indocentrism? Is this another mullah narrative from Bangladesh? Why he need to, well, what point he is making is okay, but why he need to pick India? So this I didn't find in person. This I didn't encounter in person, but when under my lectures on YouTube, the threads, if you go through that, people are coming all these interesting comments. Why you have to unnecessarily pick India? And then they find that, okay, so you are denying that the Hindus had to sacrifice in 47. No, I am not. But I am saying that this is not the only narrative of partition. Definitely, Muslims in East Bengal had the blood and tears of Hindus in their hand in 47. There is no question of denying that. But making that partial story, the whole story of partition, is problematic. So that was my point. So, but people don't like, some people do not like the fact that, okay, so you are basically raising the Muslim perspective, you are raising the East Bengal perspective, and that means you are actually denying the Hindu perspective or suffering of the Hindus. And then there is this often nationalistically charged comments like ungratefulness of Bangladeshis, which is, I'm sure that most of the people in this room know, that Bangladesh should ever be grateful to India, that India played a instrumental role for the liberation of this country. So we should be grateful. And why? And then there is this secular progressive audience, a section of audience who raises this question that why you are bringing up this stuff now? Like, is this another attempt to divide the nation? Are you going to promoting religiously or communally charged part of stories, and you are trying to bring them in forth, and then you are actually, because then to keep the nation integrated, we have to stay to something people prefer, that they thought that being secularist, progressive, and is the best thing, and they couldn't see that how that narrative actually excludes many other narratives as well. So these awkwardness, these things had taken place with my work. I encountered that in person seminars, and there was this a very reputed singer who worked in the field of partition studies, who just completed her PhD in partition studies or border making, and she had joined in one of my book talks, and then she questioned there that the question I already shared with you, that are you promoting some kind of Bangladeshi nationalism or Bangladesh-based nationalism against Indocentrism? So I asked her to go through my pages, and you will find the story is not that simple, and I am questioning every other aspects. So now, where from these things come? As I said, this is this awkwardness, this discomfort, this suspicion, or this what should I say? This is a part of the historical process of othering, as anthropologists say, making people other. So this is a process of otherization. In the process of state, particularly state and nation making, we are talking about 1947 partition, which is state making, nation making, which is border making. That has straight relationship with identity politics. So any battle on the ground of identity politics actually lead us to this awkwardness, to this suspicion. And that affects people on both sides of the border, but not only on both sides of the border, but it also affects people within the same border. Like, so when I was interviewing, when I was conducting my field research, I can see at certain point my interlocutors who are non-Muslim don't want to talk about 47. Because for them, the interviewer is someone who is from the dominant ethnic group, Bengali Muslim. So what's the point of digging that old wound and saying something that wouldn't fit with the dominant canonical hegemonic narrative? And if that doesn't fit with that, what's the point of dragging some potential danger dragging themselves into some potential danger? So I can see the avoidance, denial to talk from my Hindu interlocutors. Same with the Biharis. When we ask them, I want them to talk about 1971. It's a similar thing. What's the point of saying, like, so when Anam Zakaria, the Pakistani writer and popular, she writes she writes in the field of academic and both the academic and non-academic genre. So Anam Zakaria was writing in her piece, and she was saying that in Bangladesh, all the histories of 71 starts from the night of 25th March, which is the massacre of the Bengalis. But Bengalis hardly say what the date to the Biharis till 23rd of March. So this is interesting. We know that the history is not that simple, that it's not one-sided. We all know that. We are mature enough, we read this far, that we know that no nationalist history is enough. They don't say it all. But still, when I read Anam only a few years ago, and I find, well, what actually happened before 23rd of March? And if we know that history books, official history, official narratives, and our family stories hardly match. Go to your nani, go to your dadi, go to your grandma, and ask about 71. What they will say, that will hardly meet the narration of the official textbook. So why there is this gap? So this is interesting that after reading Anam, I was thinking, like, why? Even me, I was committed to do a subaltern historiography of 1971 initially. The project finally ended up this in 1947. So I was thinking that why even I do not acknowledge enough or read enough or dig enough about the suffering, about what happened to the Biharis immediate before 25th of March. Why the histories, we know why the histories in Bangladesh never say about that. So what I was talking, this awkwardness is inevitable. This uncomfort, this awkwardness, this illegibility. Like when I was talking, I'm talking like in Bangladesh and West Bengal, we even speak the same vernacular almost, like we can understand each other's vernacular, and we share the same language. We share many cultural and cultural capitals in our. So it's interesting, even after that, why they struggle to accept what I am saying about Indocentrism. Why the denial of why the Bihari or Hindu interlocutors couldn't trust me. I'm an outsider. I went there for field research. I was assuring, but what's the point? Because the category is there, the social category is there, the power relation is there, the unequal relationship is there, and that contributes to the making of knowledge, that contributes to the epistemology, that contributes to the methodology of research. Why don't we go up to that? So I was talking about that this thing, like, it's not only about 47. After 47, it was 1971. And then this is this long July in 2024. In this July, we stand against the regime, against the past regime. We stand against the autocrat. And we know that we are not homogeneous. We know those who stood here are diverse, divergent. They came from divergent political training, orientation, different social upbringing. And then it was not the matter until the removal of the autocrat. And when it's done, then the diversity, the divergent feature become a challenge to accommodate. Now we are in battle with whether this would go to the far right, whether this would go to the extreme Islamist, whether this would go to liberal Islamist, whether this will go to not Islamist but pro-Islamist but and okay to accommodate secular Bangladeshi nationalism, or it will go to, or the last stalwarts of the left politics there, last elements of the left politics there, would this go to there? So now we cannot even talk to each other. The illegibility is there. The awkwardness is there. A few weeks before or few months before, we were okay to say that what's the point of saying that Abu Saeed is Jamaat? That doesn't allow, that doesn't give it legitimacy to kill someone. Just because of his political orientation, you are not supposed to kill someone. We could say that, and knowing that my politics is not pro-Jamaati politics. But I asserted that during those days. But now, when things are over, we need to negotiate with each other. We need to look forward. We need to build the nation. The identity politics is there. Like in 71, it was the state making and nation making. In 47, it was the state making and nation making. In long July 2024, it's not state and nation making. It's basically making of the nation again, not state making, but making of the nation again. So the identity politics is there. And that awkwardness and discomfort is there. So my question is, how would we deal with this diversity? How would we transcend this thing? The only way, there is no shortcut, there is no easy thing. The only way is to believe that this is a land for all. The only way is to promote that this is a land for all. But why would everyone agree with that? Some is ready to say that this is our land and we will only survive here on our terms. This is where the critical thinkers, this is where the academia need to intercept. This is what they should say out loud. This is their point to say, like this should be a land for male, female, and third gender. This is a land for Muslim, but this is a land for non-Muslim. This is a land for Bengali, but equally this is a land for a non-Bengali, Chakma, Marma, or even smallest of the ethnic groups. It's their land too. So why wouldn't the exclusionary politics, actually the exclusionary identity politics will take us nowhere. So when we struggle to overcome this illegibility, we overcome to face this awkwardness, because we cannot transcend our own niche. We cannot transcend what we have learned as truth. We reside within the comfort, with our own comfort zone. We reside within our own hegemonic, dominant, canonical narratives. We reside within our own nationalist, gendered, sexualized politics. We reside within that. And when we reside within that, how would we transcend? The only way, I think, is to allow everyone to accommodate, to aim for. When I was making critique of Indocentrism, definitely I was not talking about some Bangla centrism. I was talking about incorporating every other voices of partition that had remained unheard. That voice could be from Assam, from Karimganj. That voice could be from Chittagong Hill Tracts. That voice could be from Morikchapi. That voice could be from that small town of Hili where I conducted my field research. So, by challenging Indocentrism, it's not compensatory as well. Methodologically, I'm not talking about a compensatory approach. It's not compensatory, but to accommodate. It's not compensatory, but to accommodate every other diverse narratives. So, and that would definitely give the researcher a safeguard. I think if you can follow me, if you aim to accommodate the diverse narrative as a researcher, if you accept, as a researcher, if you learn to address your frustration, because you engaging with your research work or field research, or as an anthropologist, I talk too much about field work. When you go and talk to the people, you have your own expectation. You have something in your mind that you want to listen to this. So, when I started this research, I had in my mind that partition is about nostalgia. And then my entire thesis said something else. People said something else. One of my interlocutors in Hili Bazaar said, "Oh, you are looking for nostalgia. We didn't have that much." So it's interesting, after 6 months of fieldwork, he was saying that to us. He was saying that after partition, they have good amount of money by exchanging lands, because land on the other side was more valuable. So they had more money, and they had a new beginning, and they had a high hope. So it was not nostalgia initially. So it's interesting. It's not that simple or clear-cut thing. Definitely there are mixed matches. Definitely there are elements of nostalgia. Definitely there are pains and suffering of leaving the ancestral place, or many other things. But at the same time, people also have other things. And when I struggled, I was not ready to listen to that answer. Someone else told me. I actually lead the person to a certain direction. I was asking him, well, you have seen 3 different periods. Like you have seen the British, you have seen the Pakistanis, and now you see Bangladesh. So which one you prefer? Which one is yours? Which one you would say yours? And that person said, Bangladesh is mine, Pakistan was mine too. So this is interesting. I was never ready to accept that. For me, Pakistan could never be my place. I had those nationalist bias. And being the researcher, facing those awkwardness and learn to reconfigure. I teach about beyond national. I teach to go beyond nationalism to my students. But even then, after all these years, during my fieldwork, I find it awkward when he said that Pakistan is mine and Bangladesh is mine. And then this person says this interesting story that during the last days of 71, he was staying on the other side of the Hili, which is Indian Hili. So the Pakistani soldiers surrendered, and they were arrested, and they were taken the convoy was passing through the Hili Bazaar, and some local people was throwing stone or throwing something to them, and this guy couldn't accept that. He was like, why would you throw stone to them? Like, it's our enemy, we would fight. Then he has in mind that why an Indian/Hindu would throw stone to a Pakistani soldier. They are our enemy, but that doesn't allow the Indians to throw stone to them. This dilemma had always been there. But Bengali Muslim in East Bengal and Bangladesh had always struggled with this hyphenated identity. Dina Siddiqui said it's double burden of identity. They always, like, whether celebrating Pahela Boishakh would be very anti-Islamist, whether a rally for Palestine would be too Islamist. The dilemma of Bengali Muslim had always been there. Now, this awkwardness, if we don't address, what I was saying a while ago, wherefrom I get diverted, I said that this is the dilemma, this divergence of the, like, every process is divergent, and covering this divergence or accommodating this divergence, address the awkwardness, would only give you safeguard as a researcher. What kind of safeguard? Like what happened to my case. People try to label me, and if they really go through my text, they will find that label doesn't work. They find that I am critiquing Indocentrism. That doesn't mean that I am critiquing and I am denying that we had shared cultural or imaginary world in our upbringing days. We have shared cultural things across the border. When we are talking about, when I am critiquing about Indocentrism, I am not promoting any Bangladeshi brand of nationalism. I am also talking about how nation states actually creates its own others and treat the others in a very derogatory way. So, if someone would want me to label as mullah, I would say that I have talked about the Hindus and their sufferings in East Bengal as well. I recognize the historical responsibilities of the Bengali Muslim, and I also said what happened after 47 toward the Hindus during the Pakistani period, after 1971 till today, what is happening to the minorities, religious minorities on this land. I have no problem to acknowledge that. And then one would say that I am probably like too much against against Bangladesh, like why I am talking about the Biharis. But I am also talking about, or someone would find me as Muslim, biased to the Muslims or promoting the Muslim identity. But I am talking about the Hindu identities as well. So there are contradictory experiences of the same population. It's not that a West Bengali intellectual or a friend, a West Bengali colleague would fail to understand my language. But this is also in the same academia when we are all passing through the same corridor. My colleague here would get me wrong because of our different orientation, different understanding, and different politics. So the best thing is try to map out all the diversities and try to put them on paper. And if we really map out the diversity and acknowledge the diversity, it's not, we have to understand that when I critique about Indocentrism, I say I was critiquing a hegemonic approach toward history. When I was critiquing Indocentrism, it's not, the evil is not India. When I'm critiquing the Indocentrism, the evil is the way the epistemic violence had taken place, that by South Asian studies, we are talking about basically the colonial India or post-colonial India. We hardly heard other voices in South Asian studies. We hardly heard voices from peripheries of South Asia. So my point is that to raise different voices, to accommodate multiple voices, to accommodate contradictory voices, the voice that you necessarily do not own, but the voice is there in the society. So why not accommodate that? Why not address that? If the people in Bangladesh now decided that they will vote for the mullahs and the land will be for mullahs, you can feel bad, but you have to accept that. That's what people want. And if the mullahs decided, like Sheikh Hasina did, Sheikh Hasina decided that they will play with this identity of mullah in one hand, like play with the Hifazat and Islami Shashan Tantra Andolon, and then on the other hand, Sheikh Hasina would say that like promote some kind of Islamophobic politics in Bangladesh. And now the mullahs would say that you can wear this dress, you can do that, you can do this, you can roam around on Pahela Boishakh, and if we find a couple, we will get them married. If they're going to materialize that, they will get their return. But why don't, as a researcher, as an academic, as a scholar, it's our responsibility to address every voices as far as possible, to count every voices that prevails in the society. Bring them next to each other. Lay them next to each other. We can talk about which one is hegemonic here and which one is not. And subscribing the hegemonic voice gives you some kind of conformity, some kind of sense of assurance. You are comfortable with that. That happened with the Bangladeshi secularists. They find a comfort zone, but that is also exclusionary. You can't see that. So, in one hand, you really have to question or challenge the point of addressing every possible divergent and contradictory perspectives, put them on the table together next to each other, is basically dismantling a dominant hegemonic canonical narrative. Our task as a scholar is that. And our task to think about the future of Bangladesh after this long July. We really have to give up our comfort zone. We really have to transcend our own comfort zone and ask questions beyond and address the perspective beyond. Of course, you can question the politics of the other. Of course, you can question of any other effort of bringing up a new hegemony. You should challenge, you should question the new effort of bringing up a new, against the Bengali hegemony. If someone promotes a new Islamist hegemony, hegemony of the Khilafat, you can challenge that. You can question that. But at the same time, you have to remember that that person is also entitled to this land. Just because his politics is entirely against you, that doesn't give you the right to push them outside the land. We have no right to push anybody. We have no right to say this is our land. This is everyone's land. This is our land, but this is everyone else's land. This is other people's land as well. I know this is more about theoretical. In practice, I know this sounds like utopia, but identity politics otherwise would take us nowhere. After this long July, we should accept that this nationalism, how broad they pretend to be, they are narrow. How inclusive they want to be, they are narrow. Identity politics is narrow. The self-proclaimed inclusivity of the July masterminds miserably failed in the last few months. We should question that. That in the name of inclusivity, are you basically promoting some kind of exclusionary politics again? But at the same time, this is our task to engage with the awkward. This is our task to engage with the unknown. After partition, the Hindu guy in Hili Bazar said that it was a strange time, known people become unknown. That happens during the moment of rupture. That happens. That happened in long July as well. After this long July, known faces become unknown to you. But we need to acknowledge that. We need to understand that. We need to address that. We need to accommodate that. I think I'm too much repetitive already. I should bring an end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that very honest, brave, and open analysis of how we other people, and just at the moment of otherization, the other becomes illegible to us, and also it's awkward dealing with them. But as you said, you're the theoretical, maybe the practical side is too much. I want to bring it to even more theoretical point, not theoretical, academic point. When we think about academia and academic practice in the subcontinent, it has been very Indo-centric. South Asia has come to equal India for many, many years. And now I think events like these, this conference for one, and events like the Long July, kind of make us come back to other parts of South Asia where politics, culture, etc. are being debated and discussed and lived in other ways. So here I would like us to talk about South Asia studies, and I think we do that. And remember all the strangenesses and the strangers that we have created amongst ourselves. The border that was made is not just the Radcliffe line, it's also the borders that we have ideologically created among us, borders that separate us because of our political standpoints and views, our religious practices and beliefs, the way we dress and all of that. We create divisions, and how do we talk and how do we bring these divisions closer? One of my favorite things is to always say that when we think of South Asia, we should think of us at one periphery of South Asia, somehow straddling southeast, south, northeast, and maybe it's in this very liminal region that South Asia exists, that with all its differences, its ups and downs, its fractures, and its unities. So maybe, as Dr. Ferdous was saying, that studying the partitions of the mind that have been created, the otherizing of people that have been created, will be wonderful. So thank you very much for thought-provoking and bringing us from 47 to 2024 and 2025. So the floor is now everybody's. Nancy.
There are a lot of questions that arise from the things that you have said. I'll try to focus on a couple of them. First thing is, who writes matters. Indians write far more than us. Indian Bengalis even more so. I studied at Oxford. Most of the material I was finding were written by Indians. So if you don't tell your story, no one else will. That's one factor. The other is, of course, it's also related to power relations, access to information, resources in your country or abroad. They're the ones who get far more scholarships than we do, even in terms of proportion, country proportion, state proportion, and so on. So there is that inequality in access.
Historically,
And we have inherited that, and that undermines our position. Right? I was just sharing that story with you when I went to Oxford. I hadn't done Indian history. And there were these Indian blokes, a bit my age or a bit older. They knew everything, and I felt so stupid. I had to read up, 20 times more to get to the same level. So that is an obstruction which many of us face. And even today, I have this very young Indian colleague who's working on Bengal Muslims. And I said, you guys are going to write our history because we're not doing this kind of study.
No,
right. I mean, the kind of painstaking research that needs to be done, we shirk away from it. So we have to take responsibility. So it is about power relations, but not entirely. But on the other hand, I would have to say that we have to struggle harder to get to the same level. And it's not easy because of our circumstances. We also pull back one another instead of encouraging them. Apart from that, the issue of, and maybe I don't want to speak too much. If somebody else is raring to go, I'll sit down and I have a couple of moments.
I would like to respond to your observation. Yes, you are absolutely right. There is this historical differences, and there is this, particularly in the field of language and literature, there is this effort from some from East Bengal to claim East Bengali literature that is not Calcutta-centric. Like Farhad Mazhar, like Ibadur Rahman, like when Ibadur wrote this book named Puro Banglar Bhasha, they tried to say that language and literature in this Bengal should be different. But then, Farhad Mazhar not subscribing his political critics, but Farhad Mazhar was fascinatingly saying the particular thing that, look, we have to work. It's the same thing, like, where is our if we want to make a parallel or compare, where is our work? Where is our share of what we have done so far? So that is, your point is completely valid, and there is this historical inequality. But at the same time, the dominant narrative in partition studies was about the exodus of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. East Bengal had never been in partition studies. The only tailor-made way East Bengal was present is the departure of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. I say this is true, but this is only half true, a partial true, because there are many other stories. People also came from West Bengal or other parts from India to East Bengal, and that story is not here. Now you say that this is our task to write. True, but our scholars, when they engage into that, I'm not talking about the literary work. Literature and film and creative genre allows a much liberty, and they actually sometimes did commendable job. But historians, political scientists, anthropologists or sociologists had done almost nothing new. They just adopted that Indo-centric paradigm because that fits with their secular progressive niche. That narrative fits with very well, that it's about the suffering of the minorities, and they just wholesale adopted. They didn't say about the transformation here. Why couldn't they see? Because the dominant narrative is there about the departing non-Muslims. My father, or your father, or your family actually formed as a class during those periods. My father became principal of almost 60-year-old college in Bangladesh, even before he was 36. How that had happened? Because all the senior Hindu professors had gone to the other side. So the transformation, the opportunity for Bengali Muslim, the jubilation of Bengali Muslim was there. It's not a simple story. Definitely at the rise of my father, there was the tears of the departing Hindu professors. It's complicated. But there are other versions of the history already we are living with, but our scholars fail to address it. Our scholars specifically chosen.
I don't fully blame.
Do you have any more questions, any comments, more?
Maybe comment.
Comment.
Maybe a comment.
Yeah, go on.
So no, I'm very happy that someone actually had, I should say, the academic honesty and the guts to speak on this subject so openly, so frankly. You were talking about, and what Asifa said, do academics even matter when we write? And so I have been researching this topic, and I have published 3 papers in international journals, but I've always met with stiff resistance, and the only appreciation that I got was from abroad. I had professors writing to me from European universities, from Indian universities, wanting to collaborate on projects. I had to say no.
Ma'am wanted me to take my work forward and maybe do a PhD or something on it, but I had to give up because of this stiff resistance that I met with. And I agree with what Razina said about finding ways, finding strategies. And maybe this is what Emily Dickinson meant. She said, say it all, but say it slant. So maybe that's what
Definitely. Ben Schendel, an extensive researcher on Bengal borderland and Bengal borderland. So Ben Schendel said that Bengal borderland is a hotbed of like small arms trafficking. Now Ben Schendel is not from this society. He's saying that about your state, about your society. And we, the academia in Bangladesh, is so nationalist, so petty nationalist, so damn nationalist that we don't want to acknowledge that. And that's our fault. What's the problem? If your country has this, you should write this. Is it glorious that you are concealing it and somebody else coming from abroad and writing this off? What's the point? So our academia needs to gather that courage, needs to grow up basically. Needs to grow up and needs to be academically committed rather than being reside within this niche of nationalist statist episteme. Yeah.
So with that, we brought this wonderful keynote to a close. We have another session downstairs in our department. So I would encourage everybody to go there because it is going to be a very interesting one with our own Thomas presenting on his research. And thank you so much for a very honest, brave, and open analysis of how the other people, and just at the moment of otherization, the other becomes illegible to us, and also it's awkward dealing with them. But as you said, the theoretical, maybe the practical side is too much. I want to bring it to even more theoretical point, not theoretical, academic point. When we think about academia and academic practice in the subcontinent, it has been very Indo-centric. South Asia has come to equal India for many, many years. And now I think events like these, this conference for one, and events like the Long July, kind of make us come back to other parts of South Asia where politics, culture, etc. are being debated and discussed and lived in other ways. So here I would like us to talk about South Asia studies, and I think we do that. And remember all the strangenesses and the strangers that we have created amongst ourselves. The border that was made is not just the Radcliffe line. It's also the borders that we have ideologically created among us, borders that separate us because of our political standpoints and views, our religious practices and beliefs, even the way we dress and all of that. We create divisions. And how do we talk and how do we bring these divisions closer? One of my favorite things is to always say that when we think of South Asia, we should think of us at one periphery of South Asia, somehow straddling southeast, south, northeast, and maybe it's in this very liminal region that South Asia exists, that with all its differences, its ups and downs, its fractures, and its unities. So maybe, as Dr. Ferdous was saying, that studying the partitions of the mind that have been created otherizing of people that have been created will be wonderful. So thank you very much for thought-provoking and bringing us from 47 to 2024 and 2025. So the floor is now everybody's. Yes.
There are a lot of questions that arise from what you have said. Try to focus on the calculation. First thing is, who writes matters. Indians write far more than us. Indian Bengalis even more so. I studied at Oxford. Most of the material I was finding were written by Indians. So if you don't tell your story, no one else will. That's one factor. The other is, of course, it's also related to power relations, access to information, resources in your country or abroad. They're the ones who get far more scholarships than we do, even in terms of proportion, country proportion, state proportion, and so on. So there is that inequality in access.
Historically,
And we have inherited that, and that undermines our position. Right? I was just sharing that story with you when I went to Oxford. I hadn't done Indian history. And there were these Indian blokes, a bit my age or a bit older. They knew everything, and I felt so stupid. I had to read up, 20 times more to get to the same level. So that is an obstruction which many of us face. And even today, I have this very young Indian colleague who's working on Bengal Muslims. And I said, you guys are going to write our history because we're not doing this kind of study.
No, I can't.
I mean, the kind of painstaking research that needs to be done, we shirk away from it. So we have to take responsibility. So it is about power relations, but not entirely. But on the other hand, I would have to say that we have to struggle harder to get to the same level. And it's not easy because of our circumstances. We also pull back one another instead of encouraging
That's
them.
true.
Right? Apart from that, the issue of, and maybe I don't want to speak too much. If somebody else is raring to go, I'll sit down, but I have a couple of
No,
moments.
I would like to respond to your observation. Yes, you are absolutely right. There is this historical differences, and there is this, particularly in the field of language and literature, there is this effort from East Bengal to claim East Bengali literature that is not Calcutta-centric. Like Farhad Mazhar, like Ibadur Rahman, like when Ibadur wrote this book named Puro Banglar Bhasha, they tried to say that language and literature in this Bengal should be different. But then, Farhad Mazhar not subscribing this political pills, but Farhad Mazhar was fascinating in saying the particular thing that, look, we have to work. It's the same thing, like, where is our if we want to make a parallel or compare, where is our work? Where is our share of what we have done so far? So that is, your point is completely valid, and there is this historical inequality. But at the same time, the dominant narrative in partition studies was about the exodus of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. East Bengal had never been in partition studies. The only tailor-made way East Bengal was present is the departure of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. I say this is true, but this is only half true, a partial true, because there are many other stories. People also came from West Bengal or other parts from India to East Bengal, and that story is not here. Now you say that this is our task to write. True, but our scholars, when they engage into that, I'm not talking about the literary work. Literature and film and creative genre allows a much liberty, and they actually sometimes did commendable job. But historians, political scientists, anthropologists, or sociologists have done almost nothing new. They just adopted that Indo-centric paradigm because that fits with their secular progressive niche. That narrative fits with very well, that it's about the suffering of the minorities, and they just wholesale adopted. They didn't say about the transformation here. Why couldn't they see? Because the dominant narrative is there about the departing non-Muslims. My father or your father or your family actually formed as a class during those periods. My father became principal of almost 60-year-old college in Bangladesh, even before he was 36. How that had happened? Because all the senior Hindu professors had gone to the other side. So the class formation, the opportunity for Bengali Muslim, the jubilation of Bengali Muslim was there. It's not a simple story. Definitely at the rise of my father, there was the tears of the departing Hindu professors. Yeah. It's complicated. It's complicated. But there are other versions of the history already we are living with, but our scholars fail to address that. Our scholars specifically chosen.
I don't fully blame